Hi, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Profits YouTube page. Today we're going to be talking about our defensive rankings. And before we even get started on our defensive rankings, we usually do this, but we're going to do this like normal. We want to talk a bit about our philosophy. Because a lot of times you can know all the right information, but if you draft or play with the wrong philosophy, the right information doesn't do you nearly, maybe even half as much good. So Rob, what do you got to say about how you draft defenses?
Yeah, there's a few things I look at philosophically speaking in terms of drafting my defenses. Now, one of the things that I would say, and I don't know where you stand on this one, but I would say really outside of, maybe 6, 7, 8 defenses that are very good. After that, there's a big fall off. And so what I would tell you is if you can't get a top 5, a top 5 defense after that, don't be so concerned. What I have found through the years is I play the matchups, and I found that to be very effective in having a good defense from week to week. Is if I can't get a top 5, play the matchup. Years ago, I was so preoccupied with wanting to have a #1 dominant defense that I would take some chances on younger defenses. I feel like I had to draft the right one. Now I'm okay if I can't get a top 5 defense. I'm okay rolling from week to week and playing the matchups, and that's worked really well. I did that last year when I won a championship in the league. Defense I had, I thought was going to be very good. It wasn't. They kind of washed out. I ended up doing weekly matchups, and it turned out great for me. I was able to hit it, I would say, probably about 80% of the weeks on my matchups for defense. The #2 thing, this is really, really important, okay? And I think sometimes a lot of major, even fantasy magazines, really miss the point. What they do is their fantasy defensive rankings really reflect the NFL's defensive rankings. But not every good defense in NFL turns out to be a good fantasy defense. Once again, don't get that confused. Just because they're a good defense in NFL doesn't make them a good fantasy defense. And I'll give you an example. The San Francisco 49ers during Harbaugh's years, they were a really good defense. They would rank in the top 10, top 5 in terms of points allowed, yardage allowed, and yet they were a very average fantasy defense. They really were. They just didn't create a ton of turnovers. They put some pressure on the quarterback, but they were never in the top 5. But yet, people would get excited on San Francisco because of the name recognition, the fact that in real football terms, they were a very good defense. Now, I'll give you a stat, too, just to prove that from last year. Hey, we'll look at 3 defenses from last year. We'll look at Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, and the New England Patriots, right? Now,
Very interesting.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just love what you're going to say. I know what you're about to say. I don't know if I want to ruin it for you, but we know last year that the New England Patriots allowed the least amount of points per game, but if I'm not mistaken, you're about to say that they didn't score too many fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, they were decent in fantasy points, but you're right, and that's the direction I was going. Last year, New England was #1 in points allowed. They were a good defense, yet they only finished 9th in fantasy points, okay? But take, for example, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, okay? Tampa Bay was 15th in the league in points allowed, 26th in yards allowed. They were very average or even below average defense, and yet they were #7 according to Yahoo Standard Fantasy Scoring. They were the #7th, okay? Same thing with Philadelphia. Philadelphia ranked 12th in points allowed, okay? And they were 18th in yards allowed, and yet they were #5 overall scoring defense. So once again, don't get caught up in this idea that just because they're a good defense doesn't necessarily make them a good fantasy defense, or vice versa. There are some defenses out there that are just poor defenses, but they're opportunistic, they create turnovers, they may allow 25, 30 points a game, but they get some sacks, interceptions, so once again, don't make that mistake. And here's the final thing that I say, philosophically speaking. When I look at defenses, I try to evaluate their offense, and here's why. If your defense, okay, doesn't have a very good offense, what it can do, it can make other teams play conservatively. And what I want is I want a defense, okay, that has a good offense that's putting points on the board, which allows the team that they're going against to be one-dimensional. When you have a good offense, you're forced to have to throw the ball. Of course, passing the ball creates sacks, interceptions, fumble opportunities, okay? But one of the things I think that hurt the Vikes last year is their offense was very subpar. And so teams, when they were playing them, were able to take pressure away from the quarterback by running the ball, playing close to the vest, playing conservative. And so once again, I really like to take a look at defenses that you would think it doesn't matter, but it really does matter if they have a good offense. Once again, that can create a little bit of pressure. It can take pressure off your defense. So those are 3 things I consider. How about you, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, I consider the exact same things. I think it's funny you mentioned Tampa Bay because I was just looking at them, and they're really impressing me this offseason and looking at what they did last year, but I'll wait to talk about them until they come up in my rankings. So why don't you get started? What are your top 5?
Okay, my top 5 defenses. Now, I think a lot of people have this defense #1. They've been #1 for years, and that's the Denver Broncos. Now, they don't have DeAndre Ware anymore, but he was getting older. Last year, he only had 4 sacks. I think they're going to be fine. They've got some young guys that really kind of picked up the slack. They do a great job. One of the things that hurts them is what I just previously mentioned. I'd like to see a little bit better play on the offensive end from the quarterback. That would help their defense, allow them to put more pressure on the quarterback. Denver Broncos are my number 1 defense. Number 2, the Houston Texans. And if everything falls into place, and I think it can, they could easily be the number 1 defense this year. Clowney came into his own finally after all the years, all the hype. Last year, he really kind of came into his own, and he developed into a serious defensive player. He puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback. He can play the run. He can do it all. Now you put Watt back there who's healthy. And that's another team last year that was hurt by their quarterback play. Brock was so terrible moving the ball. The defense was always on the field. Teams rarely fell behind, which allowed them to run the ball, which took pressure off their quarterback and took away Houston's ability to pressure the quarterback. But I think you got to expect better quarterback play this year, right? Nothing can be as brutal as Brock. And so better quarterback play. You get Watt back. Clowney finally came to his own. I love the Texans at number 2. Number 3, I've got the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, they're another team that's hurt by a bad offense. Okay, with that said, they're tenacious, they're opportunistic. The Vikings are great. In fact, I'll go on to say this, that Hunter, the defensive end, he'll be an all-pro this year. This guy is top 5, top 10. He's got an amazing future. He's a bright talent. Number 4, Seattle Seahawks. They're a team that's getting up there in age. They're getting a little older, but they can still bring it. And whenever that defense plays at home with the crowd noise, it creates a ton of issues like Seattle, number 4. And number 5 is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, they lost Campbell in the offseason, so they're going to lose a few sacks there, but you got Honey Badger that's back for a full year, and I like Arizona at number 5. How about you, Christian?
So, I start mine off right off the bat is different. I start with Houston at number 1. I like what you said about Clowney. He really finally became, the guy that they drafted him to be, the first-round draft pick that we all were expecting. We all knew he was a beast. He was athletic. He was physical. But this year he finally showed us that he could really do it in the NFL. And so that, for me, I really had to put them up there because of that. Additionally, they got a better quarterback in Watson, which is really good because they're not going to be on the field the entire game. Last year, it felt like they were never not on the field. That defense was constantly out there. And finally, they got 31 sacks last year, which is pretty good, but they didn't have J.J. Watt most of the season. And, that's about a 12-sack player at least right there. With him coming back, I think you can at least add 12 sacks. And with them together, that's an extremely dangerous defense. But more importantly, when you put that sort of pressure on the quarterback, he's going to throw interceptions. And those interceptions will eventually turn into pick sixes. And I think that they're going to be able to capitalize on that quite a bit with probably the best defensive line in football. Number 2, the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos put so much pressure on the football. Their linebackers hit so hard that they get sacks and they get fumbles and they even get some interceptions. And I just think that they're all around great. I had to put them number 2, but I like Houston a little bit better. 3, I put the Minnesota Vikings. I like what you said about them being opportunistic. They get fumble recoveries, they get interceptions, and they take them back. Last year they scored 4 touchdowns, which is right up there around a lot of other teams in the league. 1 less than Kansas City, the same as the Denver Broncos, and more than a lot of other teams. And so I like their ability to do that, their ability to even get a kick return or 2 throughout the season. Moving on to 4 is the Seattle Seahawks. I love that Legion of Boom, that ability to shut down the pass. They have such a good offense. They force teams to pass a lot of games with Russell Wilson. He's such a great quarterback. But a lot of teams will score a ton of points and then the other team throwing the ball a lot and allows them to catch up. Seattle's not that way. When you throw the ball a ton, you play right into that defense. That defense gets picks, and they're going to run some of them back, and they get pressure on the quarterback among in the top 12 in the NFL. And my number 5, is the New England Patriots. Like you said, last year they allowed the least amount of points per game, and I just got to rank them there because they're consistent. You know what you're getting with them. Belichick is great. They are all around. They'll get some fumbles. They'll get some picks. They're going to get some pressure on the quarterback. They might not do any of it at the most elite number 1 overall level. They don't have the most of anything. but they're a very safe pick, a very great defense, and you don't have to worry about their offense being a liability to that defense's scoring ability. So that's my top 5. What are your next 5, Rob?
Okay, next 5. So here are my next 5. Number 6, I got the New England Patriots. You know, that's not maybe an exciting pick. They don't do anything great, but they do everything very well. They're a good team, and they're good on defense. Number 7, I got the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Kansas City had a major drop-off in the pressure and quarterbacks and the sacks last year. Part of that was some injuries. Some guys are healthier this year. We think they'll get more pressure on the quarterback. And they've always been, in the last, about 5-10 years, they've always been a good fantasy defense. But one of the things that you've got to take into account is Tyreek Hill. Whether or not he's a legitimate wide receiver, that's still debatable. But this guy is legit, real deal kick returner. So you take that defense, you take his ability to return kicks, special teams. I've got them number 7. Number 8, I got the New York Giants. Last year, if there's a problem, you would think with Manning, Odell Beckham, and some of the players that they had, it would be the defense. But last year, their defense was really dominant. The offense struggled. I love the Giants up there at number 8. Number 9, I got the San Diego Chargers. Now, I believe that Bosa is probably right now, in terms of putting pressure on the quarterback, the 3rd best D lineman in the league in terms of pressure on the QB. The only guys I can think of in the league that are more consistently able to put pressure on the quarterback is Watt and Mack. Now, once again, that's a small sample size. I get it. He was a rookie, but in the small time that he played, he had 10.5 sacks. This guy's the real deal. I like the Chargers, number 9. Number 10 is Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, no team in the NFL has put more time and effort in improving their defense in the last 2-3 years than the Jags have. And I believe this is the year that we're beginning to see some fruit come from all that investment. I think you're going to see their defense, those young players begin to gel and come together. And they're going to need to because, quite honestly, right now Blake Bortles is not looking real good. So I think they'll have some offensive woes. But once again, I like the Jags at number 10. Christian?
Okay, so number 6, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. I like the Chiefs. They don't particularly get after the quarterback, but I like what you said. Let's account for those kick returns, those touchdowns. They're very valuable. If you can get 1 or 2 in a season, it does help them leapfrog some teams. They make a lot of picks. They have very good defensive backs there. They got 18 interceptions last year, and they tied the Atlanta Falcons for the most defensive touchdowns with 5. So that's huge for me. Their ability to not just get a turnover, but to take it back for a touchdown. Now, that may not be the most consistent thing, but if you want to talk about consistency, the Chiefs have a very consistent defense. Number 7 is the Cardinals. Get after the quarterback. 48 sacks last year. That's unbelievable. That's insane. Now, they lost Calais Campbell, but Tyreek Matthew, sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble speaking today. He'll be coming back. He'll be healthy. So I don't put him at 7. I like them. I don't love them, but I think you kind of know what you're going to get. They might get a little less pressure on the quarterback this year, but they will increase their coverage. My number 8 is the Chargers. I like the addition of Bosa. I really like what he's going to be able to do on that line and add some pressure to quarterbacks. They don't stand out to me as making any huge adjustments in the offseason other than Bosa, or that they were amazing last year. But they got 18 interceptions, and they added a new talent, and they didn't lose anything, so you got to put them there. And then number 9 is the Carolina Panthers. Nobody's got more interceptions and fumble recoveries than them. Now, so 1 or 2 teams may have gotten 1 more fumble recovery or 1 more interception, but as far as both, no team got more both interceptions and fumble recoveries. And they got after the quarterback 47 times for sacks. That's huge. When I'm looking at my defenses, sacks are probably the very first thing that I'm going to take a look at, because sacks force fumbles, picks, pick sixes, and of course sacks are worth points. So that's one of the big things that I'm looking at. Love the Carolina Panthers. And then at number 10, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Only the Carolina Panthers had more or the same both interceptions and fumble recovery, so they were kind of like second on that combined list there for interception and fumble recoveries. Those turnovers are worth a lot of points. In addition, they got after the quarterback 38 times, so I like them a lot. But I also like them because that offense is good, and Winston is going to be able to, I think he's making some improvements. We've seen him make some improvements, but this year should be another step up with the addition of Deshaun Jackson scoring more points. I'd like to see that offense put more pressure on other teams to score, which will then, of course, help Tampa Bay's defense to get more sacks and interceptions and turnovers. So I really like them for this season. What about you? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, one thing I want to add to your stat there, you looked at Kansas City and Atlanta had 5 touchdowns. You're right, they tied. There's one other team that had 5 also, and that was the Chargers.
Yeah.
They had 5 defensive touchdowns last year, and so I just wanted to add that bit of stat there with you. So, no, I mean, the one thing I will say, though, is, once again, this is where we sit right now. It's July 31st, getting excited about a month and a half, a little bit less than that before the start of the season. But a lot can happen between now and the start. So if you go to our website, by the way, Fantasy Football Profits, that's profits with an S.com. We're going to adjust these as we see trends, we see things happening, developments in camp. And so this is where we sit right now in July, but in August we're going to revamp these a little bit. So we encourage you to come back. We might even have a revised video.
Yeah. So what are your next 5, your 11 through 15?
My number 11 is the Rams, Los Angeles Rams. And their defense at times can be dominant. And when everything's clicking, they're playing at home, they can shut teams down. They're another team that I think was hurt by really, really poor offensive play. And any defense that's got Aaron Donald, who arguably is the best defensive tackle in the league on their team, they're always going to be quality at number 11. Number 12, I got the Steelers, and they're trending upwards. They had to do a rebuilding, but there's a lot of young players and talent there. And so I've got them at number 12. Number 13 is the Atlanta Falcons. And this is actually a younger defense. They had a lot of young guys on defense last year, and they made it to the Super Bowl. And so they give a lot of hope to the future that this team is continuing to build, trending in the right direction. So number 14 is the Ravens. Now, I know you like the Ravens. Typically, Ravens are a good, solid team on defense. They put pressure on the quarterback. They do some other things well. And number 15 for me is the Buffalo Bills. Now, for years, I had high hopes on this team. And honestly, I think they do better just simply by the fact, and maybe this is my bias coming out, but now that Ryan's no longer the head coach, I think that guy, I've never been a fan of Ryan. I think he ruined that defense. I think he made a lot of poor decisions. I think they get a lot of talent there, and I think that they're going to round out my number 15 pick, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, before I go through my next 5, I thought it was interesting you mentioned how I am a Ravens fan. I do respect Harbaugh and the Ravens there, but I have the Ravens ranked a lot lower than you. I felt like that was way too high for them. I don't know. I don't trust that defense this year. So, and maybe that's kind of that burn bias that they've burned me in the past, and I don't trust them for that reason. But I don't know how much talent they have there this year. So we'll see. Hopefully you're right. Hopefully you are right, but we'll see what ends up happening. So I'll go. My number 11 is the same as yours, the Los Angeles Rams. I like the Rams. They are such a dominant shutdown defense. They had some struggles last year, but I think we can definitely expect them to pick it up fantasy-wise. Number 12 is the Tennessee Titans. As I always say, 40 sacks, they get after the quarterback. If you can get after the quarterback, that defense is going to score fantasy points, and Tennessee does that. In addition, they have really reloaded on that offense this year, and I'm really excited to see that they're going to force some teams to try to score up there and more points, and where in the past, not so much. But in addition, not only they got offensive weapons as far as that pass game and putting up a lot of points, they have a good run game. If they want to play and win 14-10, they can do that. And so I think that their offense is perfectly built to force teams into trying to score a lot of points and get sacks and get interceptions, but also that defense and that run game allows them to just say, we're going to play a low-scoring battle and you're just not going to get in the end zone. And I really like Tennessee for this year. Moving on is the Dolphins. They're a team that's kind of all around. They get pretty good amount of interceptions, pretty good amount of fumble recoveries, and some sacks. And I like them this year. I think that team is slowly kind of starting to come in their own. They really hurt last year when Tannehill was injured. And that offense kind of slowed down a bit and kind of hurt that defense. But now they have Jay Ajayi, a great running back. I'm excited about. Tannehill should come back and really, he was starting to be a good quarterback before he got hurt, starting to really come into his own, and I think he's going to do that this year, which will, of course, help that defense. 14, I put the Giants. I really like what you said about the Giants. I couldn't agree more. So I guess you kind of said it all. We'll just move on. And then 15, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I like what you said. No team has put more energy into building a good defense, and I think this is a year that it really takes kind of the next step. That being said, they're still only ranked 15th, so they don't need to be amazing to reach where I rank them. I don't think that all these new additions are going to make them the best defense in the NFL by any means, but I think they're going to be better than they were last year. So do you got any more thoughts or opinions, or would you like to move on? And
I'll round out my next 5, and here's why. I mentioned earlier, After you get out, like I said, 5, 6, 7, 8, that range, outside of that, as far as defenses go, I wouldn't stretch, definitely don't, okay? And don't be afraid to play the matchups. And so really, honestly, from number 21 on down, these are defenses that you shouldn't even be considering using unless you're really in a pinch and nothing's out there and you're a very deep league. And so I'm going to round out my next 5 there. And so at number 16, I've got the Carolina Panthers. Put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Overall, they had a pretty good year on defense. There's another one that I think if Cam can rebound a little bit, that's only going to help their defense. They lost a couple guys for the most part, though they're the same defense that's intact. Number 17, Green Bay Packers. Another defense. And this one's a hard one because, of course, we're Vikings fans, so we're right across the border, only a couple miles from here. We have a lot of Packer fans. But when I put that aside, the Packers play good defense in terms of fantasy goes. They allow a lot of points, but I don't care about points a lot. I care about sacks, like you said, interceptions, fumble recoveries, opportunities, things like that. Number 18, I got the Philadelphia Eagles, and then number 19, I've got Miami Dolphins. And number 20 is the Oakland Raiders. Now, their team only had 25 sacks, but they allowed young talent on defense. Mack is the real deal. Carr's a good quarterback. I think they're going to score points on offense, which is going to force other teams to have to throw the ball more. I like Oakland at number 20. That rounds out my top 20. Christian, what about yours?
Yeah, so I'll round them out, and then I guess I got something to kind of just agree with you. But at 16, I got the Buffalo Bills, 39 sacks. They get after the quarterback, and that's, like I said, when you start getting down to this level, 16 to 20 and on, you don't need to do quite as much to be ranked above a team, and little things do make a difference. And I like their ability to get after a quarterback, and I think that is a big component of them being able to get turnovers. At 17, the Philadelphia Eagles. I like that Eagles defense. I think they capitalize well. I think that they're able to have a good combination of shutting down that run and also keeping that quarterback contained and not letting him to throw all over the place and getting after the quarterback. I like their balance. 18 is the Eagles. I wanted to move them higher, but they are young, and they did have a good year last year, but I'm not sure if they're going to be able to repeat that. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to repeat those 5 touchdowns on defense, so I think we're going to see a bit of a regression. They might get player development, but I think they're going to get fantasy statistical regression, I guess, for lack of a better term. 19 is the Oakland Raiders. They are so physical. They're so good against the run. They forced 19 fumbles last year. That's crazy. I love how well they're able to shut down that run and play physical. Also, that offense, that's a really good high-scoring offense that can keep the defense off the field, keep them well-rested, and put the other team in a position where they're forced to try to throw the ball a lot to keep up and hopefully to force turnovers. And then 20, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. 38 sacks last year is pretty good, but what I like most about Pittsburgh is simply that they have a great offense, and they're going to run up that score. And if you want to beat Pittsburgh, you either have to have a great defense, or you're going to have to score 30-plus points. And that's really hard to do against a defense like that that's able to sack the quarterback so well. So that rounds out my top 20. I really like what you said. Anything beyond 20, you have to be very desperate to be playing. Anyone ranked beyond that really shouldn't be on your team. Like we talked about, very important to just go week to week and play matchups. That's one way that you can not invest too much on your defense, but still get some value out of them. I mean, even the Green Bay Packers, who are not a great defense, can have a good fantasy week if they're playing the Cleveland Browns. And so that's the thing. I always kind of made it my joke rule last year, not a real rule, but kind of a joke was, I'll just start whoever's playing the Browns, and they'll for sure have a great fantasy week. And I think that's kind of just important to remember, that matchup is sometimes more important than the defense's talent. I don't know if you have anything more to say before we finish out here.
No, I would add one point to what you said there. I do play matchups. I think it works really well. Don't stretch. Don't take a defense too early. Don't overpay for a defense. But sometimes what you have to do when you're playing matchups is not enough. We talk about week to week, and that's certainly true. But you might need to forecast a little bit. And here's what I mean by that. Last year, I started playing the matchups on defense. I couldn't land on a really solid, dominant defense, so week to week I would roll the dice. But I started noticing that during the week that I needed a bye week, well, a lot of the other owners were looking to play matchups too. And so then what I started to do was projecting out 2 weeks ahead of time. And now that meant sometimes I carried 2 defenses, which was a little unfortunate, but allowed me to still play the matchups and really nail them down the stretch there once again. So I did play the matchups, but I did look ahead an extra week, because a lot of the owners are going to do the same thing. They're going to look for a bye week fill-in. And so sometimes you might have to go out 2 weeks to play the matchups, but it can work great if you do it right.
All right, well, we thank you guys so much. As always, check out the website, www.fantasyfootballprofits.com. Remember, that's profits with an S. Go check out our other YouTube videos. If you like it, like the video, subscribe, leave a comment. We want to know what you guys think. It's important to get your guys' opinion on things. But as always, God bless. You guys have a great day.